would like for us today to turn to the book of Daniel. We'll be looking at chapter 3 and examining verses 24 through 26. Daniel chapter 3, verses 24 through 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth, come thither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. I'd like for us to think in terms of befriended by the 4th figure. This book of Daniel really just have about 12 chapters here. And it belongs to a sacred writing known as the Apocalyptic. And the apocalyptic writings are eschatology. So you have eschatological, which means they are concerning last times. For example, Daniel, Revelation, will be the same style of kind of writings. Therefore, they will speak a lot of the last days. So we speak about eschatology. That's the study of the last, the last days. Last times, and the books that you fit there, and different areas of the scriptures. So whenever you hear about eschatology, they have to do with final things. And you'll always find these books filled with symbols, imagery, and different substance. But reveal to all of us that God is the master of this world. God has a master plan. Amen. History is under God. Everything moves in the direction that God wants it to move. So that no matter what, as you look at our world from our perspective, here and there, don't ever lose the fact that in charge of this world is the Heavenly Father, our God, and everything here is under His control. Nothing is going contrary to him. He has everything under control. Men may turn here, twist there, you can't run fast. What God planned must come true. So the book of Daniel belongs to this category of sacred writings. But that book that was written thousands of years ago is a book for our times today. For it deals with a captive people. And these people were carried into a strange land. And the one that carried them there was a tyrant of his time. But it also documents for us the destruction of the holy city. So that means Nebuchadnezzar not only carried away slaves, but he destroyed the city. After plundering it, destroyed it. That's Jerusalem, the holy city. And left everything in ruin there. The people gone. Now, being in this strange land, you have here a whole different setting that they have to deal with. And it seems as though you have to look as to where and what exactly they have to do, because everything there is different. They do not acknowledge, that is the land that they're in, did not acknowledge the Jewish worship. So that was out. They had their style of worship. They also will destroy you if they are certain that you will not obey their rules. So you could imagine, when you're in such a situation, you're going to think. But here we find, the book tells us that we had 3 young men. Daniel, Shadrach, as they have the name, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. That's the name that, of course, given to them there. They are in another area, but they are speaking towards a God, for a God that rules in spite of the fact that their life was in mortal danger. There comes a time when people have to stand for something. But if you just stand for emptiness, then you waste your life. But when you stand on solid rock, then your life was worth living and dying for something. The freedom we enjoy today, especially black people, there's a lot of people out there died for freedom, that we can enjoy what we have today. And sometimes we take it as though we're never people enslaved by other people. But as you look back at the history books, it surprised a lot of us. That on this side of the world, 400 years have passed, and a lot of our black people were enslaved on this part of the world. But we read about the Egyptian slavery in Egypt. Not the Egyptian being slaves in Egypt, but the Jewish people be enslaved there. And that was a long time ago. And we compare which is the worst. My job is not so much to tell you which is the worst, because slavery is slavery. Now we're looking at Nebuchadnezzar, a great king of a country called Babylon. Now Babylon existed. There was that king Nebuchadnezzar that ruled there once. And the history of that land is recorded. So it's not to say it is anything imaginary. It was a true Arab is existing, and the king, that king, Nebuchadnezzar, is known. We look back for the year 586 BC. Nebuchadnezzar was king of Babylon. He conquered Judah, and he carried away all the sons of Israel. That is, after plundering the land, carried them away. And among the captives that were carried away were these young men I told you about. Now, these young men, they were destined for a place in God's hall of fame. Nebuchadnezzar recognized in these young men potentials, leadership potential, and therefore had them schooled by his people, in his courts, to be used for his services. The first problem they had, these young men, they refused to eat the food of the king because it was not according to their religious practice. That's why they couldn't eat that kind of food. So what they ate had to be kosher. And God turned it in such a way that Daniel had prophetic insights. He can see something long before it actually happens. Now there are people in our land, you cannot help but watch every time on the television advertisements. Visit this person, visit that person. They can do everything for us. They can see everything. They can help you in every area. I said, Lord, look at that. You're over there's that, come. All over the country now. There are these people. Because they're advertising that they could help you, just come. But here were three young men. And here was Daniel among them. And can see things before it actually happened. This is not guesswork. It is what God gave to him. And they were elevated to a place of privilege because of Daniel. But Daniel used his influence to help his two other friends, especially to be princes. You know, because if you have, of course, the opportunity to do that in a strange land, most times you would do just like Daniel did. But let's take for a time to consider the land that they were in. Babylon, where King Nebuchadnezzar ruled, was a strong and mighty nation. Militarily, they were secure. Economically, they were strong. And Babylon was the envy of the whole world at the time. And if historians are correct, they say that in their assessment, hear what they say. Babylon still stands at the epitome of human splendor, that great city that existed. In the midst of this large plains, because the land is divided by a river, that is the Euphrates River. It flowed from north to south. They tell us, historians tell us, there were 50 streets, each one of them 40 miles long, 40 feet wide. To imagine it, I just read it, but it's something to imagine. They tell us the city, like the New Jerusalem, lies 4 square. It had 25 gates of solid brass. On each side, the city was secure by walls, now listen to this, 87 feet thick, 350 feet high. And these walls were built by the hands of slaves. Now, outside the walls, there was a bridge built to span the Euphrates River, to connect the two parts of the city. And at each end of the bridge, there stood a magnificent palace. Now, you listen to the kind of beauty and structure in the ancient world. Sometimes when I look at this, I remember pictures that are shown in some parts of South America. All the ancient buildings are there. Nobody, but just the buildings. It's tell us, the story is there, but the buildings are there to tell us people lived here and they operated. What killed them out, I don't know, but they're gone. So this city of Babylon was the most celebrated in that time. And historians tell us they had some gardens, special gardens, measuring 400 feet by 400 feet. Oh, that is splendid. Now when you have money, you have might. You could do a lot of things. One of the most powerful nations in the world today is the United States. And she does a lot of things. But whenever nations are powerful, they got to look carefully at what they do. But Babylon, that Daniel went to, was the proud metropolis out in that part of the world. And she took pride in her prosperity. That you had him saying Babylon was born to rule the world, according to the language of Isaiah. Babylon declared in her heart, I am the cream of nations, and my reign is forever. I am, and there is no one else besides me. I am exempted from the vicissitudes and the decline which are incidental to other nations. You hear words? That nation was so strong and so proud and so great at that time. But they said it will last forever. If you look at the history of the Roman Empire, You find some of the same words by some of the great leaders. The Rome is forever. Babylon said that concerning herself. So pride and luxury seem to be married in. Standing alongside the realities here was, that's Babylon's side, but right in the midst of all of that, there was cruelty to the Jews. You remember they brought them and carried them their slaves. Cruelty to the Jews. Well, they lacked pity. Nebuchadnezzar appropriated unto himself that he is God. He's a God. He must be recognized as a God. Sometimes over here, it's hard for us to watch some of these things. But when you look back at the ancient history and see how these rulers, they were so powerful, literally say, I'm God. And how people worship them. Nebuchadnezzar viewed Babylon as his possession. He viewed the people as his property. Now that's what our historian tells us. But you know something? This was not the function of religion. You heard the way Babylon watches things, but that's not the way in the eyes of the Lord. But that nation never tell us that they had known God in the same way the Jewish nation had understand God. So you have here a religious kind of egomania, if I use the word right. Total possession of the heart and the mind. Pride. Nobody greater as I am. The king now, in his wisdom, Nebuchadnezzar, told his artisans, there's those craftsmen that he has, build me a golden image. You hear that? Not brass or silver. Gold. But he says, you're building that golden image to my everlasting glory. So the craftsmen built the image. And once it was completed, they brought this image to one of the plains, because a lot of flat lands. Trinidad is interesting. For those of us who live in Pity Valley area, like I grew up in Pity Valley area, these flat lands flowing back, so I wasn't seeing that. Because you Pity Valley in between mountains, have a little land. But I knew it carried the plains. So if it grows there, you're because I've seen so much flat lands. You see the mountains, not the ranges. Likewise, those who grow on this side, if you go in there now, it's like you're looking at mountains. You're only because I've seen it land. So at different points in the country that you go to, it amazes you. Here it is in that flat plain, those flat plains. He erected that image. And once it was erected, the edict came out. That is an official order from the state. When the orchestra played, the people were invited to gather themselves there at a particular time. And once the music played, people were supposed to bow down. That is like you're bowing to the king, because the image, he's God, this is image of himself. Well, that's where things went differently for our Hebrew brothers. Anybody who fails to bow will be cast into a furnace of fire. I don't know how many of you here afraid of fire. But if you cook it by a fire, you know how you wouldn't afraid of fire. So. But if you're trapped in an area with fire, is that you can't, you know where to go because smoke blocking you too, and you know, it's not a good experience. Or see some people throwing themselves out of houses because fire, and they just can't get to the step. You're trying to catch them because they got up, they had to wake them up. Fire. I want a fire take a whole house. So that might go like a racing train. So all of us have in us a fear for fire. But the order was, if you do not worship this image, saying it is God, fire will burn you. Well, in the midst of that, everybody was bow down. But here were 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They did not agree, and therefore they said that they would not bow down. Well, such a refusal was a direct insult to the king. And therefore, news got to the king. O king, those Jews who you appointed princes over Babylon are guilty of treason. They are rebelling against constituted authority. They do not bow down to your golden image. So they are insubordinate. They are disloyal. They lack patriotism. You know the good words he uses? Now they are bowing to what? An image. Let me say this to you. People use a lot of good words and trying to get us to do wrong. We ought to know what are wrong and what are right. They were called insubordinate. They were called disloyal. They lack patriotism because they will not bow to a statue put up by you, say that's a God. Now there are many gods coming up in our own nation, and you and I have to be careful what we take time to waste our time. There's some you just have to turn your eyes away from it. Don't get carried away by it. Be careful. Know who the God you serve. These boys are in a strange land. But you know something? They said, well, they publicly defy the order. Therefore, they burn. But you know what these young men say? If God allowed them to burn, so be it. But they will not bow down to these images. That image, at least. And that is exactly what they did. The music, the king said that maybe they didn't understand the instructions. So the instructions were given to them again. And the same result. He ordered the strongest men to come, bind them, throw them in the fire, and to throw them in the fire. Now believers, if I didn't read this in the Bible, I wouldn't believe it. But this Bible will not lie to me. But it just showing to you and I the power of our God. The men were in the fiery furnace. And while it was there, the king, from where he sat, or where he stood, was able to see something down there. I mean, he would inquire, did we not show 3? But I see four moving around in the fire. It's interesting. You have to admire the courage of these young men.
Yes.
We cannot bow. We know about the furnace. We believe you're going to use it. But if it be so, go ahead. Our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us out of your hands. But if he